Hello, everyone. Welcome for today's Tableau Server admin user group. We have an awesome speaker from Path, David Walker. His topic today is automated monitoring and management of Tableau Server using something new. Myself, I don't know yet. It's called Overwatch. I'm going to learn today. Some quick logistics before we start. Everyone is muted for better recording quality during the whole session. Please use the QA button to submit questions at any time. Everyone is actually welcome to answer those questions as this is the community event. And of course, we will have dedicated time at the end, try to get through all of your questions. Do we record these sessions? Of course, yes. We have been recording all the sessions in last few years. In the chat, I just post a link. That is where you can find the recordings. Looks like it's a very long link. It is a very long link. Click that to see reply. Let me know if you're not getting any previous recordings. If not, I give you another link. Let's get started. David?
Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me okay, Mark?
Yep.
Okay. So automated monitoring and management Tableau Server with a product called Overwatch that I've developed. First, let's go through the About Me section, which I really love the About Me things. Difficulty describing who I am all the time, but I solve problems and I build stuff. Usually that's around data technology, and the stuff I build is to solve those problems. That tends to be, my description of what it is to be a platform architect. So that is mainly what I do. I've been a Tableau user and server admin for quite some time. I used to brag and say I was a jack of all trades, master of many, but it's not as many as it used to be. The older I get, it seems like things are becoming more and more complex, and we're specializing. So it's been hard to maintain all the expertise across, particularly Tableau Server, and I tend to have specialized a little bit more in the server admin area as opposed to visualization, which I leave to my colleague, Jonathan Drumming. I work for Path with Jonathan, which is, if you don't know, a global nonprofit that is working to improve public health and has a strong focus on health equity. At Path, I'm responsible for our Health Insight platform, which is a Microsoft Azure AD B2C tenant, which provides Path and other nonprofits and NGOs in the public health space with analytic platforms, which includes Tableau Server, as well as access to Azure services and infrastructure. I do also provide some data analytic and visualization expertise to some of the projects that are going on in Path. Previously, I was at Cargill, where I co-led the self-service analytics team, where over the course of a few years, we went from 0 to 10,000 in the Tableau Server community and 25,000 in the greater self-service analytics community. I also have an independent consulting business in Switzerland, where I live, where I provide consulting development services for Tableau, Alteryx, PowerShell, Microsoft Azure. I mentioned that I'm in Switzerland. I live in Pouplange, which is a small village just outside of Geneva on the French border. The French says my French is not very good. My apologies to the Francophones in the audience. I wouldn't be able to speak very well with you over the phone, but I can definitely handle reading and writing, so chat and email will work great. I've been in Switzerland for about 11 years. My French should be much better, but it's not. And as you can tell, I have a very non-European accent, and that is because I grew up in Tennessee and lived in Kentucky for many years in the US before finding my way over here to Switzerland. So that's me. So this is about a product called Overwatch. Originally, many years ago. Overwatch was written with the sole purpose of paying attention to one or two particular problem processes in Alteryx server, and it wasn't the process's fault. It was an underpowered VM on which they were hosted. And it was a small product, and it literally watched for those processes to stop responding, stop them, and restarted them. I don't remember the name of the movie at the time, but there was someone in it that was in the Overwatch position where he was paid attention to incoming potential enemies, and the name that kind of stuck with me, and it made me think of what it was doing to this these particular processes. And so the name came from that military technique. I thought about abandoning it at one point, but it really does actually describe well what Overwatch does even now. And that is, it's something besides me that's paying attention to what's going on and can provide immediate alerting and support for bad actors or errant activities. So when I got to Path, I was tasked with designing and deploying Path's Health Insight platform. And as I mentioned, that's an environment that's in a Microsoft Azure AD B2C environment that's intended to provide analytic platforms for Path and for other nonprofit NGOs. It currently includes a 32-core, 3-node high availability Tableau Server environment, a 48-core high availability Alteryx server environment, along with a few other Azure services, and that says assets, it should be resources. The reason that we went with Azure AD B2C was because the targeted audience for this environment could be thousands, could be tens of thousands, could be more. And one of the advantages of going with a B2C environment is that your cost is per user is free up for the first 50,000, as opposed to a normal AD environment, which is something like $6 per user per month. And that's a huge cost difference, especially for a nonprofit. It presented some challenges, which Overwatch helps with, but that is the reason that we're in a B2C environment. And the support team between myself and Jonathan is less than about one full-time employee. So this is definitely a situation where we need automation to do as much as possible for us. So functionality for Overwatch. The core functionality includes automated monitoring of the software platforms, whatever they may be, and their host systems. As we've mentioned, currently Tableau Server and Alteryx Server are supported out of the box, but it can be any software platform system that you configure with the definition files in Overwatch. And by host systems, it can monitor obviously the server or disk subsystems as you wish. There's alerting from the messaging service layer, which uses providers, and those providers currently message over SMTP, SMS using Twilio, and Microsoft Teams. There's backup management, storage management, products that are provided, and for Tableau servers that are in an Azure AD B2C environment and possibly a non-AD environment, there is an Azure AD synchronization product that will sync your Azure AD groups and users to Tableau Server in order to allow you to continue using those groups for security on Tableau Server. There's also integration with Azure Update Management. For example, one of the things, Alteryx Servers is a little more touchy about this. Tableau Server can deal with it, but allowing a remote Azure update to randomly select the nodes which are going to be updated could result in failover and you having to deal with pushing things back to where they belong afterwards. So one of the things that this does is, as soon as Azure attempts to do any update management, Overwatch intervenes and shuts down the system cleanly provides notifications out to the messaging providers, and then once the system comes back up, does the reverse and starts things back up again. So we have weekly updates to the host system, to all the VMs in the Azure environment. And when that occurs, using the information that Azure Update provides, if it's necessary for a reboot, Overwatch will shut it down until after the update is complete and then start it back up again. I also have a large number of PowerShell commandlets for various tasks. Most of them are used in the products and providers that Overwatch uses, but there's also quite a lot of utility functionality as well for monitoring and managing your platforms and systems from the command line. I just threw this in here quickly to show you an example of some of the messaging, since I've mentioned it already. These are the types of Microsoft Teams messages that are available for either the platform or for the server. This is an example email over SMTP, and then of course Twilio SMS for sending out notifications as well. Now, this is all configurable to just about any degree that you want. You can tell each one of these providers what particular types of messages they are to handle. For example, Twilio, I have configured to only handle critical alerts, whereas SMTP is informational, and anything warning and above is handled, Microsoft Teams will send out. So you can configure this the way that you want to work the way you need. So I wanted to talk briefly about the design choices in Overwatch. Overwatch is a PowerShell application, and I chose that for two reasons. One, because it's a cross-platform solution which runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. That wasn't necessarily so true in the past, but is today. And I have a lot of experience with PowerShell. So those two choices took me down the PowerShell path. And that's how the application is built today. It does require version 7 or greater in order to run the application. Extensibility was important. I wanted to be able to support any of the PowerShell supported OSs. I also wanted to provide support for any software platform, regardless of what it was. And then I wanted products that you could add that enabled functionality, as well as providers that you could hook in order to provide access to external services. One of the challenges I had during the development was portability. And by that, I mean, I wanted Overwatch to be able to be picked up and used anywhere without people having to install a lot of other products. So I tried to avoid coupling Overwatch to any databases or to specific OS implementations for security. So I made design choices and did things that avoided that, like using CSV and JSON files instead of databases, and creating my own custom implementation for vaults to store secrets and keys, as opposed to using something external. PowerShell does have that available now. It's still, at the time when I was working on it, was not exactly what I needed. That may be revisited in the future, but for the moment, this is it's a custom implementation. So, high-level architectural picture. I've mentioned multiple components or objects in the Overwatch system or architecture. It's built on the environment includes core services for Overwatch, and then layers for each of the platforms, service layers, as well as service layers for the OSs. The products sit on top of everything and make calls through those layers, and access to external assets such as a Twilio SMS API are done through providers. The products, the platforms, the OS services, and the providers are all extensible. You can plug in new things as you wish and make modifications to the ones that exist in order to meet your needs. So Overwatch as it exists at the moment, out of the box, the functionality that's supported, it's currently on the Windows server. one of the things that's on the list to do as soon as possible is to set up a test environment in Linux. And if there's people out there that are interested in helping, that's certainly something I would welcome. The platforms that are supported out of the box are Tableau Server and Alteryx Server. And then the products include Monitor, which does all the monitoring and the alerting, Backup, which obviously is backups, cleanup, which goes through and removes any sort of files on the system, but specifically it's intended for, those things that the platform doesn't clean up or doesn't clean up frequently enough. Disk check. I mentioned, I don't remember if I mentioned it in a previous screen when I was talking about design choices, but I tried very hard not to recreate anything. And disk check kind of seems like something that, is everywhere, but if you don't have some sort of centralized monitoring system for your servers, and you're relying on, for example, Tableau Server. Tableau Server's disk check is everything, and I need more granularity than that, given the number of disks that I have. So disk check allows me to see that at the level that I need. There are products that you cannot, that don't actually run all the time, but might be a one-time sort of thing. There is an installer and an uninstaller that will get you up and running with almost everything except for the more advanced products, which include the Azure AD Sync and Azure AD Cache, which are honestly probably more of one product. The cache is the one that does all the querying over MS Graph to Azure AD. Sync is the one that then takes that and syncs it up with what's on Tableau Server. And then, as I mentioned several times, SMTP, SMS, and Microsoft Teams. Okay, so to the demo, and I need to stop my share and switch windows. I was just looking over to see questions. If you were to implement Overwatch again, would you use Python rather than PowerShell? No, I wouldn't. There are some things, there's actually only one or two things that I've run into that I can't do in PowerShell and that are, that I might wish for, something besides the scripting language. For example, I would love to have an API, and that's on the to-do list in the future. But trying to implement that in PowerShell is a little bit difficult. So there are some things that might benefit from using another programming language, but for the moment, I'm quite pleased with PowerShell. I think it's going to work well, and I have a lot of confidence in where it's going to be going. So I'm quite pleased with that choice. Let's see. So where did it go? I apologize, one moment. I need to close this so I can see. And okay, one moment. Huh. My apologies. I'm having trouble finding. There we go. Okay, now it shows up. All right, so since this is a PowerShell application, there's not a lot of visual to it. It's mostly command line. But I do want to show you some of the pieces and parts so that you get an idea of how it operates. So I prefer to use the Visual Studio Code instead of just a PowerShell window, so that I can show you, how everything is structured inside. One of the things I mentioned previously is that configuration is done through what I refer to as definition files. And those files exist for everything from Overwatch's core to the operating system, to platforms such as Tableau Server, to an instance of that platform, which in this case is tableautest.path.org. And then for the products and providers. And when the installer runs, most of these are not deployed except for the core ones that Overwatch needs. There is a template and source directory, and it goes through and pulls templates, for example, for providers that need to be parsed and have the answers you provide in the installer put into them and deployed. And I've just done the installation earlier today on this system. So you can see all the files are in green were the ones that were deployed. And inside of them, for example, if you look at the SMTP one, everything is based on PowerShell files, including the configuration. There's no INI or any CSVs that are involved in configuration. It's all objects and then hash tables that it uses in order to provide those. So this is where, for example, the server, the port, whether it uses SSL, was filled in and deployed. And once all of these are in place, the definitions file, and you run, for example, one of the products, or for example, this file that just basically says Overwatch. This one will do all the initialization, but not start a particular product. It'll go through and it looks at all of the definition files to understand what the environment is, how many products it's got running, what providers are supported. It then does the platform initialization refers to, in this case, Tableau Server, and it goes out and reads from the API what nodes are involved on Tableau Server and what components they're running, and it builds the topology out and then goes through pre-flight checks to do basics like network connections, making sure you can do PowerShell remoting. It figures out which one is the controller, the TSM controller, the initial node, and verifies that that one's okay before continuing. It looks at your licensing, and I should scroll past that quickly, and make sure that everything is up to date and that you're in compliance, as well as checking SSL certs. If, for example, your cert's going to expire in the next 3 months, it will warn you as you run this and let you know that you need to prepare to update that. And then if there are, so it goes through a series. If I go back to, if I go here to the pre-flight, there can be any number of pre-flight files, and they can be checks or updates. In this case, there's nothing for the OS. There's some that's run for Tableau Server itself. There's some that's run for the specific instance. In this case, I have some trusted hosts that I want to verify that I can get at, or actually that have access to the repository. That happens to be the resource monitoring tool system that needs to be able to get access to this. But you can also do updates. So I've got some group policies that I update here, not much on Tableau Server. There's quite a bit of things on Alteryx Server, for example, that we ensure every time there's an update that are included. For example, Alteryx overwrites your run as for the service. So we set that back. They seem to change how they deploy Python frequently. So we ensure that the Python libraries that we require for our workflows are installed. And you can do that in pre-flight checks, pre-flight updates. There's also post-flight updates that can occur as well, and checks afterwards if needed. So that's all done every time a product starts. And what you just saw us run through by running the Overwatch PowerScript file shows the sorts of things for my implementation of a Tableau Server instance. Now, the primary product for Overwatch is the monitor. And just to avoid having to go through the pre-flight again, I'm going to disable that momentarily. And then I'll run the monitor so we can get there a little faster. And the monitor runs every 5 minutes as a scheduled task on Windows Server. And so every 5 minutes it fires up, it goes out, connects to Tableau Server, gets its status, and reports back whether it's running, degraded, or down. And then the next time it runs again, it checks current status again. It also compares that to previous status. So if, for example, your previous status was running, but now you're degraded, it won't alert you yet. It does have some flap detection because a lot of times, what you're detecting in a Tableau and server environment might be a backgrounder restarting, for example. And you don't want to throw an alert every time a backgrounder stops. So it makes 2 more passes and keeps track of what's been reported. And if within the next 2 passes, which is 10 minutes for the monitor, if the condition is still the same or worse, it then starts sending out alerts through the messaging service layer. Otherwise, if it goes back to being okay, then it will return to normal status and not report anything. The monitor can also be configured to send out heartbeat status however often you want to. I do it once a day, where it sends a step. It just confirms that the platform's up and running, that Overwatch is paying attention, so you don't wonder over a period of time whether or not things are actually behaving as they're supposed to. Now, this is built on, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of PowerShell commandlets that are being used here, and all of those, which is both good and bad, which I'll address in a moment, are available after you've run, for example, any of the products or the Overwatch.ps1. So, for example, if we just don't want to run through the monitor, but just want to get the current platform status, we can issue a command to get that, and it'll return the roll up for the platform. But you can also drill down into specifics in some of these objects that are included. One thing I wanted to mention that the Overwatch core services do in conjunction with the platform services layer is build out the platform topology. So for Tableau Server, and the platform topology is broken down into primarily nodes and components. So you can see, what nodes are available. If you wanted to see what's on this specific, whoops, sorry, that's not what I'm supposed to do. Okay, yeah, well, demos. So if I could get that to work the way I wanted to drill down into it, you could see the node ID of the components and the node info, or you can look at the specific components that are available, and it will tell you on which node they're running, how many are running, and what the instance ID of that particular component is. But as you noticed, when we looked at the high level, it also knows what your initial node is, which is important for connecting and making sure you're talking to the right one in some instances. And it knows the condition of the repository that you can also specify through this interface. If you which is the preferred repository, and then there's a lot of aliases that you can use for just looking. Whoops, not 1.1. Okay, I am suddenly not remembering how to do that. Been a little bit since I drilled down into that, but the topology is really very important. Fortunately, Tableau Server is good about making it easy to get that and to parse it. Alteryx Server takes a lot more work and requires a lot of configuration up front, which is done for you, but can be modified to support however you might have configured the environment. Whereas you can pull that information from Tableau Server, you literally have to tell Overwatch how you deployed Alteryx, and then it can interact with all those components as well. Let me look at time here. Okay, so it's 18:30. So I mentioned before that I have, you won't be able to see much here because this is a test system, so it should be okay. So I have a Vault implementation that's that maintains the required admin log accounts that you need, as well as anything that is related to a credential. So, for example, the account and password for SMTP, or your account number and your token for Twilio SMS. So anything can be stored in here and retrieved. There are 2 vaults. If we look at the data, there are 2 vaults that are maintained. There's a key vault and a secret vault. And I realize these are in the same place, and that is a bit of an issue, but it's very difficult when you're trying to avoid not tying it to another product to implement something that is as secure as we would normally need it to be. So this is something that could be improved, but it's designed well enough, I think, that for most use cases, it's decently secure. You'll also notice that there's a lot of caches here. There is if we look back in the definition, there's a classes PostScript file, which defines all the objects that are in Overwatch. And that includes what a Overwatch file is, and a log file, a cache file. And these cache files are used to maintain the most recent data that you retrieve, for example, from when we did a get platform status. And all the cache files are JSON based. And some of them, like the products cache and the providers cache, have no expiration on them. Other ones, like the platform status, only last for about a minute, and it's designed to allow Overwatch to go faster when it's making multiple quick requests for platform status within a few seconds. So there's cache files to improve speed. We've mentioned all the definitions. I wish I had time to show the installer. Just wrote that over the past couple of weeks, and it now automates the complete installation, where before it was manual editing of the definition files. And we mentioned all the other products. One thing that I mentioned before that I haven't included in the installer yet is configuration of these 2, the Azure Adsync and Cache. Those will be coming shortly. I just did not have enough time to do them because they're fairly complicated and involve a bit more work in the installer, but those will be there. One thing, let's see, do I have time? Not really. So I mentioned that this does run as a service, and it does do all the configuration for you. The installer will leave these disabled, and you'll need to enable them manually, because many times, for example, I change to run under a different account for various reasons, or if you want to change the triggers or the frequency, but everything is run off of these. There are one other thing I want to mention. The other thing is that one thing that's not in the documentation yet, is kind of halfway done, is the command guide. There's a lot of things that you can do. I won't do that. I won't do that here. But for example, you can start and stop a platform through the command line. That's not, greatly useful for Tableau Server. And there's a lot of things that Tableau Server just does well by itself and really doesn't need all this. Even though it's here, I still just do TSM commands most of the time. But it is there if you need it. On Alteryx Server, you can go down even further and start and stop specific components. So there's a wealth of management commandlets that are here as well. One thing I wanted to show that's related to the Azure Adsync. I can't show too much about it, but basically this is identical functionality to what Tableau provides out of the box, with the exception that you can't specify that you're creating Azure AD group. What you do instead is you create a local group, and we're talking about obviously in a non-AD environment that is exactly named what you named it in the Azure AD environment. And Overwatch queries Tableau Server on a regular basis, looks at those names. If it sees one that matches what it's got from Azure AD over MS Graph, it then populates that with the users. So one of the things that I do as well is export all the data automatically to a visualization that allows me to monitor what's going on. So you can see here that this is just reporting all the activity over the past few days, where it's removed users or added users or updated them and added them to groups. You can focus in on errors, if there were any, read the raw log, and then just because sometimes, well, this is a data-driven alert, so that if I don't see an Azure AD update within like 36 hours, that's highly unusual, which means I probably have a problem. It notifies me, and I can then go take a look at it. But this is a very hands-off operation and works extremely well for syncing your groups up to Tableau Server. So I'm going to stop this and go back to the presentation, which is here. And then I'm probably going to have to jump a few hoops to get it. And then I have to swap it again. Okay, that should be correct. All right, a few more things to talk about before we go to Q&A. So what's next for Overwatch? Well, one of the things that I don't like that I haven't done and should have done a long time ago is putting all this into PowerShell modules. It's not. It's just a big collection of command scripts, commandlets. So there's some things that you should be able to do with this that are typical for a PowerShell application of this sort that aren't yet done the way they need to be. So that is something that is on the to-do list. It in no way impacts functionality. When you open up either a PowerShell window or Visual Studio Code, the context is maintained and you have access to anything that's been executed and has a global tag on it. And the installer still takes care of helping you with doing all the installation process. So it still works well. It's just PowerShell module is the way that things are supposed to be deployed when you write PowerShell. So that is something that needs to be done. The GitHub repo has some documentation, but not as much as it needs to. I still need to get some detailed work stuff out on the architecture, especially the command guide, and then also a developer guide for people that want to add OSs or platforms or write their own products and providers. First and foremost among all that work is getting Linux support. So that will be the first thing. I mentioned earlier the need for an Overwatch API, and it looks like I started to type that and never finished. There's a couple of things that I want to be able to do, particularly being able to request current platform status data, and to be able to use that to drive visualizations or to drive what someday will be a centralized implementation of Overwatch. And I say centralized because right now for Tableau Server, Overwatch has to be installed on the initial node. I don't have it to the point yet where it could be on a separate server and then communicating with either remoting or agents in order to do that work. So that is something that I would like to get to. There's not with the exception of the Azure AD stuff, there's not a significant load that this puts on the system, but still, best practice would be not to have that there and to be able to install it and run it from someplace else. And I'm toying around with the idea of integrating with the resource monitoring tool in order to get at some additional data from Tableau Server, which we do have and run and use extensively. So the Overwatch repo is here. This is my personal account that it's under, but it is public. And you can clone or download the repo as of now. I do ask that if you have issues, that you report those through the repo in the issues section. And I'm also going to be very honest and admit this is my first public GitHub repo, so be kind, be patient. And if I've done something wrong, please, I welcome guidance and help at doing it the right way. So if anything like that needs to be done, feel free to jump in and tell me so. We don't really have a lot of time to go through this. There is an installation guide on the repo that you can look at and go through that describes how it works. So we're kind of getting to the wrap up point here. I am looking for help. So if this seems interesting to you and you have PowerShell skills, are willing to learn, particularly if you know Linux and PowerShell, and are interested in adding something new to the product, would really welcome anybody that wants to participate as a contributor. And finally, here is some contact information where you can reach me if you need to get hold of me, or obviously through the repo if you want to put up an issue. So that leaves us with a few minutes for Q&A.
All right, thanks a lot, David. For anyone, please feel free to submit more questions in the Q&A area.
Yeah, so I'm looking through some of the things. Yeah, Overwatch is third party. I'm the developer for it with some past support. Captured CPU. Somebody asked about CPU disk uses in memory.
Yeah, actually for this question, Dave, CPU memory disk, there were a lot of answers in the chat. As a recap, Tableau will give you the CPU memory disk. As a matter of fact, the disk you can get from Tableau site or on a server admin view already.
And Overwatch can do that with PowerShell as well.
Okay. And also looks like I do not believe the Tableau can give you site level CPU or site level memory. I don't think so.
Okay. And somebody asked about Overwatch being registered in appropriate security bases. I had not thought of that. No, it isn't. Yeah, I'll look into that. I don't know anything about it.
The question in the chat, does Overwatch give you a site level? I'll let Dave answer this question.
Give by site level. No,
I doubt, because Tableau,
no.
I think the issue for site level is that Tableau logs does not write a site level detail log. I believe in certain log. I think Tableau is aware of this. I heard some time back Tableau was going to make it happen. I just went through a couple of releases back. I did not see the site level information in anywhere log as a feature yet. But I heard somewhere Tableau was working on this. I don't know, maybe some future next year. Hopefully Tableau will have the site information in some level of log. And then other tool will be able to get the site level information, CPU memory, so on.
And I'm realizing I forgot to mention something rather important, which someone just asked about, which was, does Overwatch need a license and what does it cost? I don't believe I mentioned anywhere that this is obviously open source. I'm using the, I always say GNU because of that childhood television program, whatever it was, GPL v3 license. So pretty much you can do anything you need to with it, with the exception of building and distributing a closed version of Overwatch. So it's free. Download it, give it a try. And given that this is just now going public open source, I will be as responsive, very responsive to issues. And like I said, if you reach out to me on, especially the first two, email's kind of a last resort. I'm not good at paying attention to emails. So if you can use Slack Connect or use Twitter to ping me if you're having problems or have other questions, or I've missed something that you posted up in the repo under the issue section, I am quite willing to sit with you and work through any problems that you have in order to get this up and running.
Jonathan has a question. What are the biggest benefits of Overwatch for Path?
So there's so I would my first answer would be cost, and there's two parts to that. One is I do not pay attention to Tableau Server anymore unless Overwatch pings me. It does a good enough job paying attention to the things for which it was designed. Now, that it doesn't do everything, obviously. I also use the RMT and pay attention to that regularly as well. Thus the comment earlier about maybe integrating those two at some point. So Jonathan and I are able to work on higher value ads instead of daily admin and ops activities. So there's a benefit there because there's very little human intervention that you have to pay for. The other big benefit is, I mentioned Azure AD license per user is $6 per month per user, whereas the first 50,000 in B2C are free. That's 700,000 plus a year. And it was I will admit, it was a bit of a pain getting it, figuring out everything and getting it to work. I could do it easily again and help other folks do it again. But that's having Overwatch be able to make some of the sites continue to look like they're using Active Directory was a huge benefit to Path and saved us a lot of money over having to pay for Azure AD licenses. And we've gone to Log4j. Anybody got? Oh no, there's a can Overwatch shows the performance like slowness help identify the root cause. Well, like I said, this isn't. I use for performance issues. We have the resource monitoring tool, which is the add-on for Tableau Server that we use for that, which works quite well. And I realize there's a cost for that, and in some cases that might be prohibitive. But it's way better than what we've done for years and years, which is building our own. And I use it almost 2 or 3 days a week, where I just scan quickly for performance issues, or we get alerts from it. And it does a great job of taking care of that aspect of server administration. So it's not something that I intend to put into Overwatch because RMT does it well enough. And no, this is a private product. There's no license key from Tableau for this.
All right, we do have a few more minutes. Any other questions? Any questions around Tableau Server? I know right now we are having a very big vulnerability issue with the Log4j issue. Myself, I have not heard any fix from Tableau yet, although I'm going to talk with Tableau Premier Support in a couple of hours. I'm just curious, in the community, anyone knows what should be the workaround solution for us before Tableau's official fix is ready? Any workaround? That'll be more than welcome. Of course, we cannot shut down our Tableau server. Jasmine asking me what is Tableau server I'm using version. I'm using 21.2. I plan to upgrade next month to 21.4. Yeah, turning off the log is is a big idea. I don't know if we want to do that. Okay, that was another interesting answer. Remove this class. I don't know what that means. If we remove the class, does it cause any other problems? But that's an interesting idea.
Well, as we've gotten away from questions about Overwatch, I just wanted to say thanks, Mark, for the invite and the opportunity, and thanks to everybody that joined to hear and learn about Overwatch. And I hope you will check out the repo and the code, pull it, and test it out.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much, Dave, for a new way, a better way of monitoring Tableau Server. Free, it's open sourced. Lovely. And does not need any server add-on license or data management license. That's beautiful.
No, nothing.
Beautiful, yeah. Next month, we are going to focus on the Tableau 21.4 new features, particularly on the new centralized security and the virtual connection features. I'm going to team up with a Tableau dev team, product manager for these new big features. You will see the schedule to be out very soon, tentatively about 4 weeks from now. I think we are targeting January 13th. Okay. Nice chatting. Very nice chatting with everyone. And thank you very much, Dave, if you're here again, still here. Thank you very much again, Dave, for your awesome presentation. Thank you, Jonathan, for your recommendation. And talk to everyone next month. Happy holidays. Enjoy Christmas. Bye now.